The sun, generously spilling its warmth, gently caressed my face, and a light, almost playful breeze, like an invisible artist, combed through Athena's golden strands of hair. We sat on an old, brightly painted bench, located in the very heart of the park. Athena, swinging on a round, woven rope swing, laughed heartily, and this pure, childlike laughter filled the air around us, creating an atmosphere of carefree happiness. I watched her, feeling the warmth of maternal love, which like sunbeams warmed every cell of my body. Today was a normal day, one of those we loved to spend together, enjoying the simple joys of life. The playground we were on was filled with children of all ages, their voices merging into a cheerful din, creating a kind of symphony of childhood. We were only 10 meters from the place that, in 30 minutes, would become the epicenter of a terrible tragedy, but at that moment I didn't know that our lives would change forever. I couldn't even imagine that an ordinary day would turn into a nightmare that would forever be etched in my memory. Athena, trying to reach a fluffy cloud that slowly floated above us, stretched her little hands up, and her eyes sparkled with childish curiosity and admiration. I smiled, watching her spontaneity, and felt the peace and carefree nature of this moment envelop me. But somewhere deep inside, like a quiet whisper, a strange premonition crept in. I couldn't explain it, but it made me feel a slight anxiety, as if an invisible shadow had flashed through my soul. I pushed away these disturbing thoughts, trying to focus on Athena's happy face, her ringing laughter, this fleeting moment of happiness. Suddenly, my gaze caught a boy sitting on a swing next to Athena. His eyes were focused somewhere in the distance, and he seemed a little detached from the general noise. Perhaps he was just daydreaming, or his thoughts were far away. I didn't pay much attention to it, but later, this image would forever be etched in my memory, like a warning I couldn't decipher. My phone lying on the bench vibrated, reminding me of itself. I mechanically checked the time. 30 minutes. 30 minutes before the world around us would explode, tearing our ordinary reality to pieces, turning an ordinary day into hell. The quiet hum of the playground was suddenly shattered by a deafening explosion. The sound was so powerful, it felt as if the sky itself had fallen to earth. A wave of terror washed over me, and I instinctively pulled Athena close, trying to shield her from the unseen threat. The ground trembled, and a cloud of dust and debris billowed into the air. I felt something sharp graze my leg, but at that moment, the pain seemed insignificant compared to the sheer horror that gripped me. I blinked, trying to clear my vision through the thick dust. Everything around me was chaos. Children were crying, adults were screaming, and I could feel panic rising in my throat. I quickly scanned Athena, checking for any injuries. Her little face was covered in dust, but thankfully she seemed unharmed. However, her breathing was labored and shallow. Debris rained down from the sky like a deadly shower, and I could feel pieces of it striking my body. I knew we had to get out of there immediately, but my legs felt like lead. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but my motherly instinct kicked in, forcing me to move. I scooped Athena into my arms and ran, not knowing where I was going. I could hear screams and cries, but I couldn't stop. I had to save Athena. I ran, stumbling and falling, but I kept pushing forward. Suddenly, I saw the boy who had been on the swing. He was lying on the ground, motionless. My heart clenched with grief. I wanted to help him, but I knew I had to save Athena. I ran until I reached the road. I stopped, gasping for air. I looked back and saw the playground reduced to rubble. Smoke rose into the sky, and I could smell the acrid stench of burning. I pulled out my phone, but it was shattered. I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless and terrified. Then I heard the sound of a car approaching. I turned and saw a woman who had stopped beside me. She asked if I needed help. I nodded, and she helped me into the car. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't believe we had survived. But I knew that our lives would never be the same. The car, a makeshift ark of salvation, sped through the city streets, slicing through the air with its anxious hum. I sat in the back seat, clutching Athena tightly as if afraid she would vanish. Her small body trembled, and her breathing was shallow and ragged. I whispered words of love and reassurance, trying to soothe her, but my voice shook with fear. The woman who had helped us didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply drove in silence, occasionally casting sympathetic glances at us. I was immensely grateful to her, but at that moment I couldn't express my feelings in words. Every minute of the journey felt like an eternity. I felt fear constricting my heart, and terrible thoughts swirled in my head. What if Athena didn't survive? What if I lost her? I couldn't let that happen. I had to do everything possible to save her. I remembered my injured leg. The pain was intense, but I ignored it. All I cared about was Athena. I had to get her to the hospital as quickly as possible. When we finally arrived at the hospital, I felt a sense of relief but also anxiety. I knew we had a long and difficult road ahead. I carried Athena out of the car and ran into the emergency room. The doctors quickly took her away and I was asked to wait in the hallway. I sat on a bench, feeling helpless and terrified. I stared at the closed doors of the intensive care unit, where they were fighting for Athena's life. I prayed that she would survive. I promised myself that I would do everything possible to ensure she never remembered this nightmare. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't believe we had survived. But I knew that our lives would never be the same. This road to the hospital had become a road to hell from which we still had to escape. The sterile antiseptic smell of the hospital filled my nostrils, a stark contrast to the acrid scent of smoke and dust that still lingered in my memory. I sat in the waiting room, the hard plastic chair digging into my back, but I barely noticed. My gaze was fixed on the closed double doors of the intensive care unit, the only barrier between me and Athena. Time seemed to stretch and distort, each minute an eternity. I replayed the events of the day in my mind, the explosion, the chaos, the desperate race to the hospital. A wave of guilt washed over me. Could I have done something more to protect Athena? Had I been too slow, too careless? My husband arrived, his face etched with worry and exhaustion. He wrapped his arms around me, a silent comfort in the midst of the storm. We sat together, our hands clasped tightly, drawing strength from each other's presence. The hours ticked by, punctuated by the occasional footsteps of nurses and the beeping of machines. Each sound sent a jolt of anxiety through me. We waited, suspended in a state of limbo, our lives hanging in the balance. Finally, a doctor emerged from the intensive care unit. His face was grave, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope. He explained Athena's injuries, the delicate procedures they had performed, the uncertain road ahead. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave that threatened to drown me in its intensity. Athena was alive. He was fighting. But the doctor's words also carried a chilling undercurrent. Athena's recovery would be long and arduous. There would be setbacks, challenges, and the constant fear of long-term effects. As I walked into Athena's room, I saw her small, fragile form lying in the bed. Tubes and wires snaked around her, monitoring her vital signs. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. I sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. I whispered words of love and encouragement, promising her that we would get through this together. I would protect her from any evil. I would make sure she never remembers this nightmare. In that moment I made a vow. I would dedicate my life to helping Athena heal, both physically and emotionally. I would shield her from the horrors of the world, and I would fight to make sure that no other child would have to endure what she had gone through. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and therapy sessions. Athena's physical wounds were healing, but the scars on her soul ran deep. She was withdrawn, quiet, and haunted by nightmares. The laughter that once filled our home was replaced by an unsettling silence. I became her shield, her protector, her advocate. I learned everything I could about trauma, about PTSD, about the long-term effects of violence on children. I fought for her, demanding the best possible care, the most compassionate therapists, the most understanding teachers. The world outside the hospital walls continued to spin, but it felt distant, unreal. I was consumed by Athena's recovery, by the need to create a safe and loving environment for her. I wanted to erase the horrors of that day, to rewrite her story, to give her back the innocence that had been stolen. But the truth was we couldn't go back. We were changed irrevocably by what had happened. We carried the weight of trauma, the burden of survival. And so we learned to live with it. We found strength in each other, in our love, in our resilience. We built a new normal, a life that was different but still beautiful. I decided to share our story, to speak out against the violence that had shattered our lives. I wanted the world to know what had happened, to understand the devastating consequences of war, to demand justice for the innocent victims. I found my voice not as a victim but as a survivor. I became an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. I wanted to turn our pain into purpose, to transform our tragedy into a catalyst for change. Athena's laughter returned slowly, tentatively, like a fragile flower pushing through the cracks in the pavement. It wasn't the same carefree laughter of before, but it was real, it was genuine, and it was a testament to her strength. We learned to live again, to find joy in the small moments, to cherish the precious gift of life. We carried the scars, but we also carried hope. We were survivors, and we would not be silenced.